From the award-winning podcast comes a totally improvised live show.
We have the Comedy Bang Bang Tour. Come see us.
Comedy Bang Bang Ground Beefing Tour 2026. Live across North America in 2026. Get tickets at livenation.com.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
Hi, I'm Rachel Fisher.
And I'm Desi Jetikin, and we're the host of Hollywood Crime Scene, a true crime podcast that focuses on celebrity crime, infamous crime movies, and cases from Los Angeles.
From movie, TV, and music stars to athletes, as well as the wealthy and politically elite, we cover the seedier side of the lifestyles of the rich and famous.
New episodes drop every Tuesday, and you can check us out wherever you listen to podcasts.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
There are many different competing theories as to what we're seeing at the moment in the Gulf. There are many different arguments as to why America is doing what it is doing. And of course, these always fall into roughly two camps. The idea that there is some overarching grand plan that explains everything that's happened since Venezuela in January. And for my money, the more plausible argument that we exist in the kind of the imperial decline and the chaos that initiates. So today we're going to look at those theories, and so let's make a start on this episode of the Explaining History podcast. Okay, so to begin with, let's talk about the international relations theorist John Mearsheimer. Mearsheimer is a fascinating guy and has been talking about the effects of the Israel lobby on the United States of America since about 2006. And I was reading Mearsheimer when I was doing international relations like sort of 30 years ago, but anyway. So his his argument at the moment is that America has been conclusively defeated, and Trump has in fact almost signalled perhaps even inadvertently, perhaps he's sort of so incapable of any sort of rational thought that he has signalled that essentially a surrender. Must have been about a week to 10 days ago now, America published a 15-point series of demands for essentially the dismantlement of Iran's nuclear program, the opening of the Straits of Hormuz, and a number of other key demands. Most demands most of those demands had already existed. Most of those conditions had already existed under the previous nuclear deal between America, the EU, and Iran, brokered by Barack Obama. So Trump was really seeking to return to the situation that had existed before he, under the goading of Netanyahu, tore up the Iran nuclear deal. Following that, Iran published a 10-point series of requests or proposals, or a 10-point program, which included their dominance of the Strait of Hormuz, the continuing enrichment of uranium. It included the demand for reparations, the removal of the kind of the removal of American bases in the Gulf, and a number of other demands which were favourable to Iran. And Trump accepted this 10-point plan as the basis of continued negotiations. So you experience the destruction of bases in the Middle East. America's had to evacuate its bases. One of your aircraft carriers mysteriously catches fire. The truth of that story, I'm sure, will come out at some point. You you are unable to achieve your strategic objectives. I mean, not what they are is debatable because they keep changing anyway. You lose control of the world's key strategic waterway. You find that your ally Israel, their anti-missile defense system, fails, and they start to be heavily pulverized by Iranian missiles and drones. And the key thing, I mean, this is the most crucial thing, America is running out of munitions. America is running out of Tomahawk missiles. These take a long time to build, and they're exceedingly expensive. And America has burned through something like 8 to 10 years of their Tomahawk stockpile. So, and the Iranians haven't. The Iranians have plenty of cheap missiles, rockets, and drones to throw at anyone who challenges them in the Gulf. The Americans have had to remove their ships out into the Indian Ocean. Trump is now talking about blockading the Straits of Hormuz. They can't do this. This is impossible. This is impossible because they would be doing it if it were possible to have ships close enough to the coastline that they're in range of Iranian missiles, then they do that. But the point is that major capital ships have had to be withdrawn, moved out of range. I personally doubt very much whether an American president, on a whim, can get on Twitter and say, right, well, we're going to do this thing now. And that translates into a coherent military strategy. Is it possible that in order to blockade and stop and board what might be potentially hundreds of tankers, you need to have your naval assets arranged in a particular ways, use certain kinds of ships, use certain kinds of troops, use helicopters, what have you? Can naval forces be that adaptable, responsive, and particularly when you've lost most of the bases in the Gulf that naval bases and air bases, their assets could be located at. So it all seems kind of rather implausible. So Mearsheimer's making the point that America has suffered a catastrophic defeat, and not only that, but Trump has signalled essentially a surrender. The other perspective, I mean, that is something that I think is largely accurate and largely correct. The only thing is I'm just not. I always am wary at the moment when you have theorists and historians and journalists who are positing Trump as a kind of semi-rational actor. I mean, to some extent he is, but you have to question how responsive he is to these challenges, and what level of reality he's kind of existing in at the moment. Trump's reality is very often decided by the people who are around him, who are giving him advice. I mean, he probably wouldn't be in this disaster to begin with had it not been for Netanyahu and what Netanyahu persuaded him of. So, I think you always have to just consider that we're not, when one looks at these situations, one often thinks, well, if I was in that situation, there would be this problem, and that would be my response. Yeah, cool. Well, we're not in that situation. We have to remember that it's Trump making these decisions, and ultimately it does come down to him. He has all sorts of advisors and policy wonks and think tank people, and people at the State Department and other members of his cabinet suggesting and hoping he does certain things. But as a kind of an American autocrat, which is how he's established himself, he does get to do as he wishes. The other perspective is one by the journalist Richard Medhurst, and you can find him on Twitter. I've got a lot of time for what he argues. His essential argument is and there's some really, really good reporting here, is that this is a blockade of China, which I wholeheartedly agree with. I mean, this is what this is all about. And he says that Venezuela, Iran, Greenland, and the underreported phenomenon of Russia's shadow fleet being bordered by America and our allies, the Nord Stream pipeline, all these kinds of things are about, firstly, putting Europe in the position of being energy dependent on America, and secondly, choking off China's industries. America itself has an abundance of oil and liquid natural gas, and America's currency, the petrodollar, is under immense pressure at the moment, possibly terminal pressure. So if you cripple the rest of the world and make the exports of petroleum, particularly to China, or oil, and liquid natural gas to China, very difficult, China its industries either atrophy because it hasn't quite got enough renewables yet to power itself on its own, still needs oil, or China has to come cap in hand to America, and then America, this kind of pirate state America, then gets to renegotiate things with China from a position of strength. That's all entirely plausible. It's again, his journalism's well researched and well documented.
From the award-winning podcast comes a totally improvised live show.
We have the Comedy Bang Bang Tour. Come see us.
Comedy Bang Bang Ground Beefing Tour 2026. Live across North America in 2026. Get tickets at livenation.com.
And but again, it relies on this idea that Trump himself isn't simply doing what he's doing at the moment, for example, to manipulate markets, commodities markets for oil. If you notice, there'll normally be something apocalyptic on a Sunday night, and then later in the week there'll be some kind of rollback from that to some kind of reasonable kind of position. And if you look at the trades being made, it's very clear that he or somebody very close to him is speculating on commodities values in order to short currencies and commodities and make lots of kind of fraudulent magic money in the meantime. So yeah, the thing about Trump is that his kind of model of American foreign policy piracy that is not wildly dissimilar to that of previous generations is of an order more venal, personally venal and chaotic. The likes of the Bushes, for example, they like to make sure that their remuneration happened outside of office. Trump, he knows that he needs to make hay while the sun shines. He needs to do his stealing while he's in the Oval Office. The argument about choking off China, though, yes, I entirely agree, and I think that there is the part of that is particularly valid is the idea that this is, irrespective of whether you're talking about Trump or Biden or even Obama, the actual policy position towards China hasn't changed very much, irrespective of the presidents, particularly from Obama onwards. And that indicates that, I don't want to use this term deep state because it gets so overused that it doesn't really mean very much. It's just the kind of it comes to mean in certain quarters things I don't like very much. But the kind of policy think tank institute, the kind of the neocon view of the world, which didn't die with Cheney and Rumsfeld. It sort of it lingered on. The kind of like the neocon policy establishment within Washington is there simply, come rain or shine, whether you're talking about Democrats or Republicans, and states have long-term strategic visions for good or ill, irrespective of who the president is. So from that point of view, the Medhurst argument, I think, there's something to it. Often things are journalistically reported as being more coherent than in reality they actually are, and probably there is an element within the Trump administration that sees opportunities, that thinks, right, well, here's an opportunity on that aspect of policy to move forward very quickly. Here is a place where we have to kind of pull back. And if you can observe that from Tehran, what you might be thinking is these talks are a once in a lifetime, once generation, a historically unique moment to permanently protect ourselves from the Americans. This is an opportunity to remove the Americans from the Gulf forever. This is an opportunity to have leverage over the world. And this is an opportunity to reduce US power in the Middle East permanently. And this is an opportunity to finally deal with the threat of Israel. The question of what happened, I mean, during the peace talks, it seems increasingly clear that either America had no interest in negotiating in good faith anyway, or that they were derailed by Netanyahu. I'm drifting towards the latter conclusion. And the question about what happens with Israel is an interesting one. Israel's popularity across America has plummeted, and the American the American public aren't going to forget in a hurry that Israel tried to drag them into potentially a world war, and Israel's kind of standing in the estimation of many Americans, not just Democrats, not just people on the left, actually MAGA types as well, throughout the genocide has plummeted. So what you may see now is a total reordering of decades and decades of support in the Middle East for Israel. You have a political class. Gavin Newsom the other week was saying that he was a dyed-in-the-wool Zionist, and he would thought Israel was a kind of very special country that he would do what it took to protect. And you have a united political class where there's a total disconnect between themselves and broad swathes of the American public. And indeed, sections of the American Jewish community who are by no means united on the question of Israel at all. So Iran potentially sees a future where there is division between the two of them. Trump has apparently cursed Netanyahu's name, and if he did, then he will have followed a long line of American presidents that reach a point normally much sooner than Trump has, of rage-filled exasperation with Israeli prime ministers. It's almost a kind of a White House tradition. So this is a kind of a generalized sort of little kind of thought exploration for a Monday morning on where, not necessarily where all this is going, because I don't think anybody can give you a meaningful answer on that. People point to the worst, most terrible outcomes, fertilizers being held back, planting seasons being missed, and famines happening. All of that's possible. Is it going to happen? I don't know. I do hope not.
From the award-winning podcast comes a totally improvised live show.
We have the Comedy Bang Bang Tour. Come see us.
Comedy Bang Bang Ground Beefing Tour 2026. Live across North America in 2026. Get tickets at livenation.com.
This podcast episode today is more a case of trying to fathom to some extent, the unfathomable, to trying to fathom the kind of the strategic motivations behind America's actions. Of course, because there's so much chaos, because Trump, it seems like, according to the New York Times investigation, it seems as if Trump went into all of this on a kind of like a yeah, sounds good sort of whim. Netanyahu presented him with a case for attacking Iran. He thought very little about it. He had senior military and intelligence people saying this is a really bad idea, don't do it. But he had, of course, his son-in-law Jared Kushner and his good friend Steve Witkoff, who I believe egged him on to the decision as well. Because everything is done in that kind of chaotic, off the top of your head way, because the White House and various branches of government have been effectively deprofessionalized, because the institutional knowledge in the White House, because of Trump and the institutional knowledge, institutional memory that the president has access to has dwindled. And because there's this profound anti-intellectualism and this belief that nobody who really knows anything actually really matters anyway, all you need is just a key decision maker, and in this case, somebody who has kind of masqueraded as a successful entrepreneur, who's essentially just a crook. Because you have all of that chaotic decision making, you get decisions like this. You get decisions which have kind of terrible outcomes. Now, as you know, I am wary about Nazi comparisons, but there's one area where, and this doesn't just apply to Trump, there are numerous other examples of this, but there's one area where it all fits together quite snugly. So Hitler deprofessionalized large parts of his regime's ministries. He removed people that did know things and replaced them with people that didn't. Ribbentrop being a classic example. Ribbentrop gave Hitler more misleading advice than virtually anybody else. And Hitler trusted him. Hitler saw him as much of a friend as Hitler kind of was able to have with people. He wasn't a guy who was really capable of meaningful friendships. But Ribbentrop was, in Hitler's eyes, somebody who really told Hitler the truth of the world. Somebody who wasn't like one of these sort of annoying bureaucrats who would give him a misleading picture. Essentially, Ribbentrop told Hitler the things he wanted to hear, because you have a sort of an autocratic, almost kind of slightly monarchical kind of system where Hitler, as the Führer, who has ripped apart all other kind of pluralities within the state, has managed to kind of concentrate all power in his hands, has to be feted and has to be appeased to and has to be pleased. And do you see where I'm going with this? And so you have to tell him things that he likes hearing, by and large, and the most clever flatterers got to Hitler, and underneath Hitler is a state that gives the impression of order, but in fact there is widespread chaos. Far less works than you think. When the German army gets bogged in around Moscow in the winter of 1941 and they start to freeze to death, there's no winter clothing for them. They have to appeal to German people to send fur coats, to give up their fur coats. Why is all of this? Why did the tanks not have antifreeze? Why is there no, the Russian winter warfare soldiers have heavy padded clothes and whites for the snow, but the Germans don't. Why? because the systems for planning, organization, logistics, for manufacture, for all of the kinds of things that you need, had been systematically ripped apart, and there had been different ministries competing with one another and all sorts of chaos. And the chaos was deliberately created by Hitler because it helped him to remain powerful and it helped him to remain free of threats. Trump surrounds himself with similar sorts of people. He surrounds himself with sycophants and fools. And in a different way, America's supply chains have been gobbled up and run down and degraded to nothing. Well, not necessarily nothing, but degraded to a kind of shadow of themselves by 50 years of neoliberalism, 50 years of just-in-time supply, 50 years of outsourcing, 50 years of people looking at stockpiles and wondering why they are there, and instead why that can't be translated into share price valuations. That's a slightly different conversation, but it's an interesting context, or important context, I think. Anyway, I'm going to leave you there, and I'll catch you on the next Explaining History podcast. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
From the award-winning podcast comes a totally improvised live show.
We have the Comedy Bang Bang Tour. Come see us.
Comedy Bang Bang Ground Beefing Tour 2026. Live across North America in 2026. Get tickets at livenation.com.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
Hi, I'm Rachel Fisher.
And I'm Desi Jetikin, and we're the host of Hollywood Crime Scene, a true crime podcast that focuses on celebrity crime, infamous crime movies, and cases from Los Angeles.
From movie, TV, and music stars to athletes, as well as the wealthy and politically elite, we cover the seedier side of the lifestyles of the rich and famous.
New episodes drop every Tuesday, and you can check us out wherever you listen to podcasts.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Explaining History. This podcast is an independent production, and it's listener support that keeps these conversations going week after week. If you find value in the show and want to help cover the costs of research and production, please consider making a contribution. You can join our community on Patreon or make a one-off donation. Just follow the links in the show notes for this episode. Every bit of support is truly appreciated. Thanks again for listening.